Welcome to Grace Among Us, the podcast where we unearth the many faces and places of grace and share stories of the power of grace in our human lives. Our desire is that this will inspire you to see grace in your own life and share it with others.
Hello. My name is Carri Agag. I am a sustained success coach, and I help people, high achievers, make space and enjoy the ride. And I also get to have these magnificent conversations about the topic of grace with my good friend, Ebony Gilbert.
Hey, Carri Agag. My name is Ebony Gilbert, like Carri mentioned, and I work in the healthcare industry and help folks get good insurance. Really important stuff. So in my spare time, I get to hang out with Carri and talk about grace. And this is really the best part of my week, Carri.
Me too.
The best part. Don't tell anyone.
Okay. Oh, oops. Too late. So we don't do much pre-planning. We don't do pre-planning, but we do look at a question. And always love to hear from the audience. If you have a question about grace, please let us know, and we will feature it on the podcast. So, Ebony, today, we're going to talk about, we've talked a lot about what grace looks like, what it may look like as it shows up in your life. And today, it's been a lot about receiving grace, and we can also give grace. So, what does it mean to give grace to you?
So, play on words here. What does it mean to give grace to me? Meaning I'm receiving it?
No.
Or
What does it mean, like giving grace, for you to give grace to someone
else?
What does that look like?
I think it's different at different times. The immediate thing that comes to mind is when I bite my tongue. Not literally, but figuratively. When there's something I want to fire back and react on, and I'm like, ooh, hold it in, bite your tongue, breathe, take a breath, because they deserve grace, regardless of whether I think they do or not. Just on general principle, everyone deserves grace. So when I stop myself from saying the thing that immediately comes to mind to react or fire back, I'm thinking I'm giving grace. And I say to myself, give a little grace, give a little grace. Or when I feel myself being really triggered by something. In that scenario, I'm sure we'll talk about it before we're done here today, I'm giving them grace because they don't know my hangups. And it probably wasn't intended to trigger me off, but I'm also giving myself grace for being so annoyed and agitated in the moment. And now I'm beating myself up for not responding in a way that's appropriately reactive, Those things where your reaction is this big and the offense was really this big.
Yeah.
So I'm giving them grace. I'm giving myself grace. I'm sure we'll talk about giving ourselves grace a little bit later, but that's what's coming to mind right now. But it's a number of things. Forgiveness, biting my tongue, turning the other cheek, pausing, speaking up. And specifically when I say speaking up, Carri, I'm talking about if I'm in a room with someone, say a work meeting, and it's visible that someone is having a bad day and they don't want to be called on. And where the rule might be, everybody speaks in this meeting. Maybe this is the day that we run out of time before we can get to them because they don't want to, they're not feeling it and I don't want to put them on the spot. Show a little bit of grace. And then afterwards, ask them how they're doing. Because it's more than just that. I think it's also showing a little bit of interest and concern. What you got?
Oh, that was good. I have a lot. How about that?
Let's get it.
Like, first of all, for me to be able to give grace, I have to pay attention to grace. I have to be on the lookout and be willing to receive grace because I don't create it. It
Mm,
doesn't just, I don't have a grace factory inside me. It's almost like as I receive grace, then I can give it away.
mm-hmm,
So that helps me from the perspective of, like you talked about, biting my tongue. Like,
mm-hmm,
left to my own devices, I'm going to let it fly, right? I'm just going to be like, that hurt. Here, have some back, right? That's that.
mm-hmm,
And it's grace, the grace that I've received that gives me that uh, discernment, that nudge to, like, just keep your mouth, just wait, just keep your
mm-hmm,
mouth shut. And then it continues to give me that perspective of, wait a second, they might be having a really bad day. Like this, they might have just stubbed their toe, and then you
mm-hmm,
ask them to do something, and they're responding or reacting based on things you don't know about.
mm-hmm,
Um, Pausing is a big one. That's like uh, that helps tremendously with my capacity to give grace. Because if I am flying off the handle, there grace is nowhere to be found. Like, you're not getting, sorry, honey, you're not getting it. You're not getting it from me because you're just getting me and all my humanness.
mm-hmm.
Um, as you said, encouragement. And uh we've talked about these grace glasses. Like when we put on our grace glasses, like the view is a little bit is different. It's a little broader.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I'm all up in my own stuff and I'm not really thinking about anybody else and I walked into a meeting like that, I might not even notice that somebody was having a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So all the more reason, I might be going all the way around the corner, but all the more reason to, like, be wide open to grace coming to you, because here's the added benefit. Like, you can pass it along. I always
Mm-hmm.
like to be motivated. And like that's motivating to me. It's like, oh, I don't only get it, grace is inexhaustible. There's
Mm.
like this inexhaustible supply of grace. So
It's not going to
don't
run out.
exactly. So don't ever think, well, I've had enough this week, so maybe somebody else needs some. Like it just doesn't work that way. Like you get it all the time, all the time. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's available. Uh
Question for you.
yeah.
Do you find that there are times when it's harder to give grace to others than other times?
Oh yeah.
Are there just some people where it's easy? It's like, oh, you always get a pass.
Oh, that's a good question. So I think there's two answers to that. Two have
Two
shown
questions. So,
yeah, well, two have shown up to that question. Is are some people harder and some people easier?
mm-hmm. Or sometimes harder and sometimes easier. It may have nothing to do with the person. It's just that you haven't slept.
Oh, yes. Two questions. Yes.
Yeah.
So the first one, are some people easier and
Mm-hmm.
some people harder?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I don't like to admit this, but what I find is it's easier for me to give grace to strangers often than it
Oh,
is those closest to me.
oh, say more. That's interesting.
Yeah. Uh, I don't want to admit that. I can't believe I just admitted that. No, just kidding.
I'm impressed that you said I've thought about this. I'm like, have you now? Let's talk about it. What did you think
So,
about this?
um, I'll give you an example. So, do you ever watch like YouTube videos about somebody who's gone through a hard time and then like something good happens to them? I'm not being specific.
I don't watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Okay,
But
or
I get the premise of what you're
even
saying.
even movies or something like that. You can
Mhm.
you can follow the whole, like, you can follow the tragedy or have
Mhm.
empathy for the entire. It's easy to have empathy for the entire wave, because you don't have any extraneous stories that are saying, yeah, but they were kind of a jerk over here and they were
Mhm.
kind of this over here. And there's no backstory, right? Except what you're seeing.
Right.
With those that are closest, and I'm being really transparent here, I'll talk about myself as a human. I can have this nature of scorekeeping,
Mm. Me too.
and that can get in the way of grace. Almost like I just said that grace is inexhaustible. However, if you weren't very nice to me for the last week, I don't know how graceful I feel, how much I want to give grace. And that's actually exactly the best time to
Mm.
give grace.
That was good.
How about
While
you?
you were talking, there was one thing that came to mind specifically for that question. When you talked about scorekeeping, and it's harder sometimes with people because you know too much. You know all the. A good friend of mine was fired last year,
Mm,
and the story sounded awful. I mean, it was a embarrassing, kind of humiliating, get out of here kind of thing. And I was listening to the story, and I thought, man, this is terrible. But I also thought in my scorekeeping computation, you've been late to work 18 times in the last year. And they just told you this 3 months ago, and you were still late 4 more times.
yeah.
So in my mind, the compassion, the encouragement, the grace was not the first thing that showed up. The first thing to show up was, you should take your butt to work on time next time.
Yeah.
That's not offering grace. That's absolutely not. And that's not what that person needed to hear at the moment, and not inappropriate. And I did say the right thing, but my mind was saying some other things.
Well,
And to
and
your point, that's probably the most important time to show grace.
absolutely. And you just brought up, you I love that story. It makes, thank you for having a story to go with all those words.
I didn't want you to be out there by yourself. I'm like, listen, you ain't the only one
Thank
that's
you.
having
Oh,
this moment.
that's very graceful of you. But as you said, as you had all that score and you could still give grace. Like, it's still possible.
You mentioned you're not the grace factory.
Yeah.
It's coming from somewhere else. That's the only reason why in those moments I'm able to still offer grace, because I know that there's so many times that I don't deserve it. I put myself in the same situation over and over again, and I still want to be rescued. And I'm hoping for a little bit of grace of my own. So I immediately doesn't always work, humble myself and think, if this was me, if I was experiencing the exact same thing, I'd want a little bit of grace. And I get it.
Yeah.
So why not pay it forward?
I love it.
Has nothing to do with whether or not they deserve it. And who am I to say whether they deserve it? I mean,
Well, that's the whole thing.
it's a
There
little
is no,
dicey.
there's no, yeah, there's no, what's the word? There's no test to get grace. There's no prerequisite. That's the word I'm looking for.
Criteria for
Yes,
grace
no,
today.
thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's not human, right? And we're trying to apply human ideals and human constraints to something that is not human.
Mhm.
So give it
But that's
away.
what our brains do.
Yes.
So the second part of that question was, are there times when it's easier? Not specific to the person receiving it, but just times in general where you struggle to give grace. Seasons, perhaps.
Are there times when it's easier or when I struggle?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to do with my own spiritual condition
Hmm.
in general. uh, yeah, how much grace I'm receiving or willing to receive. Because sometimes I don't, I can get in a place, sometimes when life doesn't look the way I want it to look in the moment, like I forget that it's a big plan and I don't know why it is the way it is. Sometimes if I'm not in acceptance of what's going on in the present, then I have cut myself off from a lot of the grace that's here. And so it's really hard to give what I don't have. That's that, yeah. And the other times is when I'm judging. I don't know if it's judging grace, but if somebody's hurting in a way that I can't understand and I get angry, or take it personally, it's hard for me to give grace.
Okay.
Until I ask for help.
And then after you give the grace that you felt at some point was unmerited, which is the very nature of grace, how do you feel? Are you like, I keep forgiving the same situation, or do you feel better? Does it fill your tank? Are you empty?
That's a really good question. So, yeah, I feel better.
Why?
That's a good question. I feel better because go ahead. Did you?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's a really good question. I hadn't thought about it that way. This is what I see right now. If I can give grace anyway, that grace has to come through me. So I'm getting some grace at the same time. And often I can even be surprised by patience. You know, what is that? Patient forbearance. That's Ebony's word that I just used. I love it.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's almost like it just changes the whole. There's a peace, even for a moment. There's a peace or a connection. Like it's also a way that I connect with people. How about you? Can you see when it's easier or a struggle to give grace?
Yeah, I can. If I don't feel well, I'm not feeling my best. To your point, if I don't have it, it's hard for me to give it. If I'm not feeling it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So on the days when I just don't feel it. I haven't slept well. I'm hungry. I'm angry. I'm lonely. I'm tired. Any of those things, the halt. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. And sometimes I'll force myself to give grace. I always feel better afterwards, but I have to be honest with myself, Carrie. Do I feel better because I know I did the right thing? Or do I feel better because I poured into somebody and I like this connection and it made the situation better? Like, is it for the big, whole, profound reason, or is it because I checked the box and I just did the right thing? It doesn't matter. I'm sure it does. But if I did it, I did it. It's like, this is a horrible example, but I love my examples. It's like having, a list of chores. And I'm not saying giving grace is a chore, but this is just my metaphor for today.
Yeah.
If I'm cleaning the kitchen and there's nowhere else I'd rather be in the moment, like I'm not missing something as a result of this. I don't feel slighted. I do a better job. I'm in a better headspace. If I don't feel like doing it, I'm probably going to, skim on it a little bit and not show up the right way. No different than going to work every day. If you wake up well rested, perform a little bit better. You don't, you get what you get. So I find for me, when I'm offering grace to others, it's directly, more often than it should be, connected to how I'm doing. You mentioned spiritual health.
Yeah.
If I'm not well physically, mentally, or spiritually, the spout on that pour is pretty jammed up. It's pretty clogged. On a good day, free pour
Yeah.
all day long. Um, and I know the outcome is going to be that I feel better, and hopefully this person feels a little better as well. That's not enough sometimes. I just have to do it because I know I have to do it. But it doesn't always free flow. So yes, there are times when it's harder than other times. And if that was the way God chose to deal with me, I'd be devastated.
No, you only get a little love today. I don't feel too good.
Oh my goodness, that would be awful. And I can't believe I'm sitting here saying these things, but I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
It's not the same level of ease every day.
I hear that. I hear that. And it's a great segue into, like, we've been talking about giving others grace,
Mm-hmm.
but we can also give ourselves grace.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't mind,
I don't.
and I'm putting words in your mouth, so if this isn't true, please correct me. But there was, as you were going through the big C,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that there were times physically that you did not feel well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, can you speak about, like, what your relationship to grace was in that time? It's a big question.
Oh yes, it is. Let me dip into that vault. Well, I'll start by saying this, and then I'll jump off the deep end and say how I messed it up. If it hadn't been for grace, I wouldn't have made it through it. And I see that in hindsight, 2020. I know it's what got me through. I know it's what made a very difficult time bearable. So I'm grateful for it. And we had a great relationship in hindsight. We appreciate the things we went through at this point. Now, in the moment, it was tumultuous. I mean, it was because there were days when I didn't see it. There were days when I didn't feel like I was full of it to give it to anybody else. And I had to show myself a whole lot of grace. So when you're taking from one reservoir within yourself to pour into another within yourself, it's hard not to feel depleted sometimes. And the giving myself grace, there were a couple of things coming to mind. It was allowing people to come into my home and pour into me when I didn't have it to pour into myself. And not being completely embarrassed and humiliated because I had the shakes real bad and I was weak and I would drop stuff and trip over stuff and I couldn't do it. Or I'll give you a very personal example. Instead of talking generically, I sat down in the bathtub because my body was hurting and I couldn't get up because I was too weak and I just didn't feel good. And I sat there for way longer than I should have, thinking, "Oh, the energy people will just come and pour some energy in my ears, and I'll feel better." It didn't happen. So
the magic elves are coming.
It never happened, Carri. So the showing myself some grace was stop being embarrassed and ask for help, because that's why it's here. And that example stuck with me because it took a lot out of me to say you've got to receive a little bit of this and be kinder to yourself in these moments and encourage yourself and stop beating yourself up because you can't do this thing you think you should be able to do when the help is already here. There's already an acknowledgement from the people who are pouring into me that I need the help, but I'm not showing myself enough grace to even fully receive it.
I like that you use the word humility, not humiliation, right? Humility and, like, right sized. And it's I can speak for myself. Sometimes when I'm hurting or I don't feel good, like I want to protect myself. Like I want to like kind of isolate and go in my own shell. And that idea of bringing people in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Asking for help, opening up. Like, it's okay that I don't feel good. It's okay that I'm where I am. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just come meet me where I am. And that is grace. Like,
That is it.
God doesn't say, hey, first you need to have X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C, and then you can come see me.
Right.
And we
Right.
get
That's
to,
not how it works.
no, it's not.
So I think it applies to my cancer journey, but I'm sure it can apply to a lot of other things that people go through. When has there been a need to be patient with yourself and forgive yourself for things that you think you probably brought on yourself? And I didn't think that I brought cancer on myself, but it was a stomach cancer. So everything I put in my mouth, you know, I thought, oh God, is this feeding it or not? Is this making it worse? you know, oh, I skipped a meal. Oh no, so every little thing I was judging it and assigning meaning to it. And grace is not concerned with the meaning we assign to things.
Mm-mm.
It's not concerned with how we compute logic. It defies that. It defies gravity. Like there is no logical sequence of how grace should flow. And I can say that on a podcast. I can say that to my friends around me, but it took a whole different level of understanding and grace and patience with myself to understand that for myself. And I'm still on that journey. I have not arrived. I don't even see the end point, if I'm being honest with you. But I'm a heck of a lot further down it than I was when I started. But it's hard.
Absolutely. And beautifully said. And that's why we talk about it. Like, that's why I'm so excited to talk about it, is because it, like you said, it defies gravity. It isn't
Mhm,
it's not human. So like
mhm,
all these boxes and all these stories and all the meanings that we give to things are based on our, this body I have and this 3D world
mhm,
I live in, and like, some fourth dimension of technology and like weird stuff, but quantum physics, la la la. But it's like it's bigger than all of it. So it's almost, I love to say that it's like the wind in the trees. Like I can't see the wind, but I can see the effect that the wind has on the trees. I cannot see grace, but I can see the effect that grace has, and that's my only way of kind of piecing together like what I think grace is, subject to change. It's like it's so big. And when I don't feel good, I start to try to control everything and to try to make meaning out of things, because I don't know. That's what I do. Does that make
That's
sense?
good. No, that makes total sense. And
Okay.
isn't that comforting
Yeah.
that it doesn't have to, I don't have to pass a mental emissions test to qualify, you know? I could be a total wreck, giving off all kind of pollution
Yeah.
and still be able to access this grace. I'm so glad that it does not depend on logic.
Absolutely. The image that just came to my mind as you were saying that, like being a lunatic or whatever, it's almost like for those of us who had records, like albums and a record player, although it's still the best audio quality. So
It
there,
is.
there are still audio files, but like the image that went in my mind is like this record spinning around and like the needle just going. And at the same time, that not being the chaos, but like the beautiful thing about grace is like your world can be spinning out of control, and it's okay because grace is still accessible. Like you can pause at any time
Hmm.
and ask for grace,
Yeah.
invite it in. Like you haven't gone too far.
No. And in thinking like that you haven't gone too far, it only makes sense for you to look at someone else and say, there's nothing they've done that's so bad at this one. Think of the worst thing you've ever done. on the worst day, did it define who you were?
No, it was just a bad judgment.
It's just a really bad moment, you know?
And what if it did define who you were?
I like that.
Grace doesn't think so.
So if we had to come up with 3 words to say what this looks like when we're extending it to others or ourselves, I'll go first because I don't want you to take my word. Patience. I cheated. Your turn. You got one?
Yeah, I'm trying to, it's like curious.
Okay.
Like instead of thinking I know, being curious.
I like that. I don't know if I would have thought of that one. I like it though. Gonna add it to my tool belt. I like that. So we have patience, curious, and kindness. I tell my team at work all the time, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to beat ourselves up, you know?
Absolutely.
Kindness. Patience, curious, kindness. You got another one? Make it even? I don't like odd numbers.
Oh, you don't? I like 3s. Patient.
I do like 3s.
Patient, curious, kind, gentle.
I like it.
So may everyone who hears this be patient, curious, kind, and gentle with yourself this week, or for as long as you like.
Until it stops working for you. And I'm just going to dare to say it's probably going to keep working for you. So.
And if it does, yeah, get back to us. Let us know. Ask us a question.
Let us know. Let us know.
Well, Ebony, do you think we did it?
I think so. I think so. I was curious as to how this conversation was going to go. And I don't know. I feel a little bit lifted afterwards, you know?
Me too.
I'm giving myself some grace in this moment because I'm losing my voice. And I'm tempted to hit the pause button and say, we've got to do this over again. But I'm going to offer myself some grace.
It's that sexy, raspy.
It's congestion.
Well,
it's allergies, but I'm going to offer myself some grace here. And Carri, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. It's been a pleasure to share with our community. You're welcome to questions, the feedback. Let us know what you want us to talk about next time. And guys, the question does not have to have the word grace in it. We can tie it all together.
Absolutely. No question is off the table here. And it has been fun, Ebony. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Be kind to yourself today.
Yes. Yes. Will do. You too.
And I'll be curious.
Okay. I'll be kind. You be curious. We'll come back and do it again. How about that?
Absolutely. We'll be patient until then. You like that?
Oh, good job. Good job.
Okay. It was corny.
I love it.
All right, folks. Grace out.
Grace out.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. We love to hear from you, and share it with a friend. Also, please be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. We hope you're leaving with another pointer to grace, a new perspective that will light it up in your own life. Until next time, be well, be bold, be kind to yourself, and be on the lookout.